Hi everyone, my name is Courtney and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be covering all the new LGBTQ+ releases for the month of September. This is me just covering the new releases. I have not read any of these, but it's a way to remind us to keep reading queer all year round and to support authors as they come out with new books. So hopefully you can find something that you're interested in that you haven't heard of before and get excited for some new releases. And we have a lot today. There's a lot of books to cover, so I'm going to be going through them pretty quickly with very brief synopsises. And like last month, September is really the last month before we get into the spooky season. Last month and this month is really where you're getting a lot of books with fall vibes, and we're also starting to see some holiday books coming out for the Christmas holiday season. I get my information from two sources. For all my adult titles, I source them through Pub Alerts on Literary Journal. This is a professional website, I believe, that has all the releases coming out for the month. And then for all the young adult titles, I'm sourcing them from a blogist. Their blog is Bird Books, and I highly recommend checking them out, especially if, again, you're really into young adult releases. If you know a better source, a different source, I would love to know, because a couple always slip through the cracks for me when I'm doing this research. So without further ado, let's get into the new releases. So starting off, we're going to be going through all the releases for September 2nd. If you didn't know, books are released on Tuesday, so we are going to be going Tuesday by Tuesday. So again, first Tuesday of the month is going to be September 2nd, and we're going to start off with Every Step She Takes by Alison Corcoran. This is a contemporary romance with lesbian or sapphic representation, and it is adult. This is going to be Alison Corcoran's fourth novel, and this is following one young woman who lives in Seattle and needs an escape. Her sister ends up breaking her leg and can't take this big, fabulous trip to Portugal, and she ends up taking it, and adventures ensue from there. I don't believe this is connected Kiss Her Once for Me, but it does have similar cover art, so maybe it is. The next book we have is It Had to Be Him by Adib Khorram. This is listed as romance, LGBT, adult, and contemporary. The most popular comp title for this month was definitely Heartstopper, and we will see it a lot. But this novel is about a main character who gets dumped by a boyfriend for just not being spontaneous and exciting enough, and so he decides to be spontaneous and go on a trip to Italy, and there he runs into a high school crush, and they obviously fall into an unexpected friendship and possibly more. Adib Khorram has written a bunch of young adult titles, so I'm very intrigued by this as an adult title, but it should be a fun contemporary time. And as you can see, we're getting a lot of travel books. That seems to be a big theme for the end of the year. Next book we have is Bad in the Blood by Matteo L. Cirilli. This is a YA fantasy, and it's listed as queer, and it's set in a 1920s inspired setting, and it looks like there is like magical fae who are mistreated in this world, and it's about a human brother and a fae sister that are teaming up to solve this murder that's going on. The next book we have is Season of Fear. This is another young adult title. It's queer and it's horror and fantasy, and it is also listed as lesbian, so it is sapphic, and this takes place in a village where fearfulness is considered like saintly or godly. The women of her village have to feed this ancient being with their fear, and our main character does not feel fear or is not able to do it in the proper way. Something comes up, obviously, and she feels like she has to figure this out, how to give her fear away to this being before it devours her sister. The next book we have is For the Rest of Us. This is an anthology edited by Dahlia Adler. This is listed as short story, contemporary, holiday, and young adult, and it's 14 diverse holiday stories about different celebrations. Dahlia Adler is a queer writer and bloggist themselves, and so while this isn't listed as queer explicitly, I have a very good feeling that it will be, especially because a lot of the authors that are contributing to this anthology happen to also be queer authors themselves. We can surmise that there probably will be queer characters, and if not, we will be supporting some queer artists instead. The next book for September 2nd is Rules for Fake Girlfriends by Reagan Reverd. This is listed as romance, contemporary, YA, and queer, and also lesbian or sapphic, and it looks like it deals with a main character who is obsessed with rom-coms but has never had that kind of moment for herself. She's traveling to her New England college, and on the train she meets a charming person named Charlie. Together they end up in this concocted plan where Avery has to pretend to be Charlie's new girlfriend to make an ex jealous. So if you're looking for a new contemporary YA story set in college, this one might be for you. And finally, we have Silence Voice Voices, Reclaiming Memories from Guatemalan Genocide by Pablo Leon. This is listed as historical fiction, graphic novel, YA, Indigenous, and LGBT. And it looks like this is a historical fiction graphic novel following the Dos Eres massacre and experiences of Guatemalan immigrants. The graphic novels that they're comparing themselves to are memoirs, so I'm not sure if this has memoir elements to it or if it's strictly historical fiction, but regardless, it sounds very interesting. Going into the next week, we have September 9th, and we're going to start off with We Are Always Tender with Our Dead by Eric La Roca. This is listed as horror, LGBT, and adult, and it looks like this is going to be Eric La Roca's new trilogy of short novellas, and this takes place in a New England town where obviously some disturbing things begin to go down. The next book we have is You Weren't Meant to Be Human by Andrew Joseph White. This is listed as horror, queer, LGBT, adult, and sci-fi fantasy. Andrew Joseph White has written, I believe, 3 young adult novels, and this is their debut as an adult author. And it looks like this is an alien invasion story set in rural West Virginia, so set in the Appalachian Mountains with aliens. Obviously going to be some horror elements, some sci-fi fantasy elements, and I'm always interested to see when we have a young adult author transitioning and writing some adult titles. The next book we have is The Macabre by Kosoko Jackson. I believe this is another author that has previously written some other books, and this might be their first horror debut. This book is listed as horror, fantasy, and LGBT. And yes, the description is saying that this is his adult fantasy debut. And it looks like this is a time travel story with art history as its main focus. And so we have some cursed paintings and they're trying to collect and destroy them. And maybe the paintings are like coming after them. So I'm not sure if this is more fantasy, more horror based, but it sounds really interesting. The next book we have is The Maiden and Her Monsters by Maddie Martinez. This is listed as fantasy, lesbian, horror, and adult. And it looks like this is a very atmospheric fantasy debut featuring the Jewish myth of the Golem, and it looks like our author is being compared to Catherine Arden, Ava Reed, Hannah Witten, and Naomi Novak, 3 authors that I've read previously and really enjoyed, and one that I want to read, so definitely look for that if you're looking for a sapphic twist on those authors. The next read we have is Ladylike by Mackenzie Lee. It's romance, historical, and adult, and it's about 2 women growing up in, I believe, Regency era. One of them is kind of the wild one is the more refined, dutiful one, and they're both after the same duke and end up falling in love with each other. I included the title because it is a new release, but I felt it would be remiss to not give a little brief history of Mackenzie Lee for those of you who don't know. So Mackenzie Lee has come into hot water previously under other titles that they've written and some other stuff that they have done. I believe their debut series is A Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue, which is a young adult historical fiction fantasy series. I don't want to say it came into controversy, but a lot of people were not happy with the representation of the love interest. He was of mixed race and he was epileptic, and people did not find his representation to be particularly good. I recommend reading some Own Voices reviews on Goodreads or elsewhere to kind of understand why they had problems with it, but that isn't the only thing Mackenzie Lee has gotten into controversy for. I believe in like 2018, 2019, they were set to release a coming-of-age historical fiction book with a trans lead, and in it, it had a very graphic forced coming out scene, and a lot of trans authors came out before the book's debut and was saying, like, this isn't an appropriate representation, especially because you are not trans yourself. And at the time, Mackenzie Lee very doubled down on it and said this book would get released someday. It has since, to my knowledge, never been released, but they were very unopen to criticism of that at the time. And then after that, during COVID, they went into a bookstore for a book signing, and instead of just signing her own book and maybe writing some shelf talkers or some notes about some of their favorite books, they decided it was appropriate to write in other authors' works and sign them for herself. And so there were kind of some that were just being, I guess, goofy or silly, like doing it in the Bible. And then they wrote in a Black author's book, and the note was pretty disingenuous because I don't think they had actually read the book and were just kind of saying things off the cuff. I believe she apologized for that, but I'm not sure. Again, I think there was some doubling down from her at one point, and people did not take kindly to that. So read what you will, put your money where you will, but I just wanted you to be aware that Mackenzie Lee has had some stuff. I don't know if she's since like genuinely apologized for the things that she has done, but this is kind of her first book that's come out that's been like just solely her creation, her project. So I felt like it was was appropriate to mention things that she's done in the past. The next book we have is The Most Unusual Haunting of Edgar Lovejoy by Roan Parrish. This is listed as romance, paranormal, and then queer and adult. And it looks like this is about a person who designs haunted houses. I don't know if that means he's a haunted house like maze designer or like an architect that built houses, but they don't believe in ghosts. And then this next house that they designed definitely has something haunted going on in it. A little bit of a confusing premise, but it does sound very intriguing. The next book we have is Middle Spoon by Alejandro Varle. This is listed as literary fiction, romance, adult, and queer. In this story, our main character, he has a husband, he has children, he even has a boyfriend that makes him feel young and fresh. But when that boyfriend decides to abruptly dump him, he spirals into heartbreak and is left to confront the world of dating and the world of polyamorous relationships and like the judgment that comes behind that. So this is blurbed as a whip-smart, blazing funny novel about heartbreak, unconventional love, and the way society could be. So getting into the young adult of the week, we have You've Goth My Heart by Elsie Rosen. This is listed as romance, contemporary, and queer, and of course, young adult. This is listed as a funny romance and how falling in love is scary AF, and it's again listed as a comp title with Heartstopper. And in this book, our main character, Gray, gets a text from a wrong number and he's like, is this my ex-boyfriend? Is this a serial killer? Who is this? They end up hitting it off though, and Gray becomes hopeful that this is his goth crush. And of course, this is taking place during Halloween with a big house decorating contest. The next book we have is Everything She Does Is Magic by Bridget Mosieri, and this is listed as romance, YA, fantasy, and sapphic. This looks like it's supposed to take place in a charming small town, again during the Halloween season. I love this cover art. I know people feel all types of way about the drawn covers, but I think this is super cute. And it takes place during the Halloween time with a lot of fall festivities happening. It says fantasy, so I don't know what the fantasy elements are, but I'm intrigued. The next book we have is Everything About You by Robbie Weber. This is listed as contemporary, queer, YA, and MM. This is about Milo, our main character, who is traveling to Paris for an apprenticeship at a fashion house. He wants to impress everybody, and he doesn't have time to meet a boy, but of course he does. So again, another travel story. Getting into our next week, September 16th, we have To Clutch a Razor by Veronica Roth. This is the second book in this series, and it's listed as like a heist fantasy novel. I should also mention this is a novella, so if you're looking for a novella series, this might be for you. And it looks like it's also inspired by Slavic folklore. We have another sequel coming up, and that's going to be Among the Burning Flowers by Samantha Shannon. This is a part of the Priory of the Orange Tree series, and this is another prequel novel. I'm not sure if it's a big novel or if it's a smaller one. I'm not sure how connected it is to the series, but if you are a Priory of the Orange Tree fan, you probably already know that this is coming out. So it's listed as fantasy, adult, and it's listed as lesbian and queer. We have another sequel coming out, and that's going to be A Ruin, Great and Free by Cadwell Turnbull, fantasy series. It's adult, it's listed as queer and horror, and this is the concluding book in the Convergence saga. It's a series I haven't heard much about, so I'm very intrigued to check out more about it. The next book we have is Murderous Business by Kathy Pegayu. This is listed as lesbian, historical fiction, and mystery, and of course adult. There aren't a lot of mystery titles that come out for queer audiences with queer characters, so I'm very intrigued by this. And it looks like it's about two women in turn-of-the-century New York who are solving murders and fighting the patriarchy. Not sure if it's the first in a series, but it sounds really intriguing. The next book we have is Sunward by William Alexander. This is listed as sci-fi, adult, and queer, and it looks like this is a cozy debut science fiction novel, but he is a National Book Award winner, so I'm not sure if this is his first full-length novel or if this is his first sci-fi debut, but I am very intrigued. And the tagline is, a story of found family follows a planetary courier training adolescent androids in the solar system grappling with interplanetary conflict after a devastating explosion on Earth's moon. I'm very intrigued by that as a Becky Chambers fan. Getting into our YA for the week, we have Love and Video Games by Zachary Sergey. This is listed as YA, romance, queer, fantasy, and contemporary. Another Heartstopper comp title here, and it looks like it takes place in a video game all about mythology, and it's about a group of friends that play this game together, but in the real world, a lot of them are dealing with undiagnosed chronic pain, and our main character is really worried about moving to NYU in the fall with this problem. The next book we have is The Golden Boys Guide to Bipolar by Sonora Reyes. This looks like it's a companion novel to the Lesbian's Guide to Catholic School, and it follows Cesar Flores as he comes to terms with his sexuality and his new bipolar diagnosis. Looks like he's trying to get back together with his ex-boyfriend. The next book we have is The Map That Leads to You by Ella McLeod. This is listed as queer, lesbian, romance, pirates, and fantasy, and of course, young adult. And the tagline is, a long time ago, a witch burst into flames, a pirate and a mermaid fell in love, and a map was marked with a glowing X, and a republic was born. I love the cover art for this. I'm down for a pirate fantasy, so I'm really intrigued. The next book we have is This Is How We Roll. This is another anthology. It's listed as queer, YA, and fantasy, and it looks like it's all about tabletop role-playing games with a bunch of some very well-known authors. So if you're looking for another anthology, this might be for you. The next book we have is The Dead of Summer by Ryan Lasala. This is a horror YA LGBT contemporary novel, and it looks like this takes place in a small New England seaside town again, and it looks like there is something supernatural going on. There's drownings, there's rising waves, possibly mermaids. I've seen Ryan Lasala a lot on TikTok, so I'm very intrigued by this book, and I've been intrigued by all of their books, so maybe this is the chance to get into one. Getting into September 23rd, we have Best Woman by Rose Domu. This is listed as romance, contemporary fiction, and queer, lesbian, and of course adult. By the listing, it sounds like it's going to be in the general fiction section of the bookstore, but it might be in romance. I'm not quite sure. But our main character looks like she is the best woman at her brother's wedding. She tells a little white lie, and it spirals from there. And of course, she has a lifelong crush on the maid of honor, so that begins some messiness as well. So very intrigued by that. Next we have Extraordinary Quests for Amateur Witches by Kala Cottingham, and this is listed as fantasy, YA, queer, romance, and MM. And the tagline is, after accidentally cursing his ex-boyfriend, a reluctant hero must complete a dangerous quest to undo his spell, all while falling for a brooding new crewmate with dark secrets. The next book we have is Try Your Worst by Chatham Greenfield. This is listed as YA, romance, and contemporary, and lesbian/queer. And this is about two rivals who have to team up to figure out who's trying to frame them for crimes they didn't commit. I think the cover art is so cute for this, so I'm very, very intrigued. The next book we have is This Raging Sea by Day Elizabeth, and this is listed as fantasy, romance, YA, and queer or LGBT. And it looks like our main character is living in a picturesque, perfect coastal town, all the while a horrid, eldritch secret is coming to the surface. The next book we have is Hello Sunshine by Kizzy Young. This is listed as a mystery horror graphic novel, and of course it's LGBT and YA. It looks like a teen goes missing and a group of friends are trying to go on this paranormal journey to save him from an inner demon. The next book we have is Exquisite Things by Adib Naziam. This is adult LGBT historical fiction and romance. They are known for being a Stonewall Award winner, and this promises to be an epic queer historical fiction love story. The next book we have is These Bodies Ain't Broken by various YA authors. So we have another anthology. This is another young adult anthology. It's listed as horror, and it looks like this is all about challenging expectations of who can be a hero, centering disabled and chronically ill teenagers that are dealing with a bunch of different things, from body horror to paranormal, gothic, psychological, another Halloween horror there. Going into our final week, which is going to be September 30th, let's get into these final books. Starting off with Fate's Bane by C.L. Clark. This is fantasy, lesbian, queer, and it's a novella, and it is adult. And the kind of tagline is Warring Clans, Burning Hearts, Deadly Fate. And it looks like these two young women are lured into a hidden spring. Their magic awakens and they're bind together, probably to bring their clans together. So sounds very interesting. Next we have Between the Walls by Caspian Faye. Our main character's parents recently divorced and their dad and them are moving into a new town. And in their house seems to be the ghost of a young trans boy from the 1700s. This is listed as YA. Not sure if it's horror or if it's more fantastical paranormal, but sounds very intriguing. 2. The next book we have is You Found Oliver by Dustin Tao. This is romance, contemporary YA, and LGBT, and it looks like this is the companion novel to You've Reached Sam. I believe in You've Reached Sam, it's about a girl who has like a magical connection through a telephone to her boyfriend who passed away, and so I'm not sure how this one is connected. I believe this is the friend of Sam, probably going to be dealing with grief and new love. The next book we have is Showstopper by Lily Anderson. This is listed as horror, YA, and queer, and this takes place at a youth theater camp, the scariest thing in the world. And it looks like our main character is often put into white passing roles, and they really want to take center stage, as the blurb goes, as their true Afro-Latina self. But obviously it's horror, so something else is definitely going to be going down. The next book we have is 7 for a Secret by Mary E. Roach. This is listed as mystery thriller, YA, and queer. This takes place on another island, but this time we are centering on a group of young women who live in a home for young girls. All of the girls at one point go missing, and one of them comes back, and it's her discovering the secrets of what happened. The next book we have is Joy to the Girls by Rachel Lippincott and Allison Derrick. This is a lesbian romance holiday YA novel, and it's a companion novella to She Gets the Girl, but of course make it holiday, so a cute contemporary Christmas story. The next book we have is Make Me a Monster by Kaylin Barron. This is listed as horror, fantasy, YA, queer, and paranormal, and it looks like it's about a young woman who grows up in a funeral home, and she is an assistant to her parents. It looks like she's ready to say I love you to her boyfriend, and then something goes awry. The next book we have is The Transitions by Logan Ashley Kissner. This is listed as horror, queer, YA, LGBT, and paranormal. And it looks like a transgender teen's post-op recovery was derailed when he is bitten by a werewolf and his body begins to change. So definitely heavy body horror vibes there. Next we have Fire Blooms by Alexander Villeste. This is listed as YA, queer, contemporary sci-fi. And it looks like this has a Black Mirror type of premise where our main character is moving to a new town that uses technology to prevent hate speech and bullying. Of course, it probably results in something not so good going down. The next book we have is Hollow by Taylor Groth, and this is horror, YA, queer, fantasy, and LGBT. It looks like this is a cult horror novel following an autistic teen who is moving into a community of outcasts who harbor secrets. The next book we have is To the Stars and Back by Peglo. This is a webtoon turned graphic novel. It's a romance, it's LGBT, and it's contemporary. This is another Heartstop comp title book, a sweet, slow burn neighbors to lovers romance. And the last book we have is On Starlight Shores by Bex Glelding. This is listed as graphic novel, YA, fantasy, and LGBT. And our main character has to return to the town she was born in to discover the magical mysteries of her late grandmother. And I love the cover art for this. It looks absolutely stunning. So definitely intrigued to check that out. But those are going to be all the books coming out in September with LGBT characters and themes. Let me know if I missed any. Let me know what you're excited to read, or if you've read any of these and what you would recommend. But thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys later, and happy reading!